Hi everyone, welcome to the channel. My name is Nick Cosgrove, and I'm back with this week's No Filter Q&A. This is the episode where I answer all questions related to diet, training, and supplementation that I've received over the last 7 days from our in-house clients, online clients, as well as a few of our online followers. Remember, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. All right, let's get started with this week's no filter Q&A with question number one. Nick, are carbs really the enemy? My old coach used to tell me to try and consume the least amount of carbs possible in order to get the best results possible. Okay, I think there's a big misunderstanding behind carbohydrates. A lot of people feel that carbs make people fat. And here's the thing is when you're looking at carbs as a whole, you have to make sure that you understand the difference between complex carbohydrates, which are the good carbs, versus simple carbohydrates, which are the bad carbs. Okay. Now, it's not that I want to demonize any foods. However, if your goal is to lose weight, you want to limit the amount of simple carbs you're consuming. So simple carbs would fall under the realm of, let's say, cookies, muffins, pizza, certain types of pasta. Okay, so these are things that you don't want to consume if you're trying to lose weight, okay, because these don't do well for your body. You look at what happens when you consume simple carbohydrates, well, your glucose levels go up, right? And also, usually things that are or foods, I should say, that are simple carbohydrates are fairly calorically dense. So again, if you're trying to lose weight and you're in a caloric surplus, it's not going to help you lose that body fat. All right. So we want to avoid simple carbs and maybe save them for one or two cheat meals a week. Complex carbs, on the other hand, are incredibly beneficial. Okay. I've talked about in the past how complex carbohydrates help replenish glycogen storages. So if you're lifting weights, you're going to feel stronger. You're going to recover faster. You're going to grow muscle more efficiently. Okay. So in my opinion, complex carbohydrates are actually necessary. Now they would fall under the realm of, let's say, oatmeal, cream of rice, Ezekiel bread, brown rice, white rice, yams, sweet potatoes, quinoa. So those are complex carbohydrates. And then you have what we call fibrous carbohydrates. Fibrous carbohydrates are what we find in your greens. So asparagus, broccoli, okay, spinach. So when I put fibrous carbohydrates on people's nutritional plans, I don't even count them towards their macro intake because I'm like, have as many as you like, because your body actually has to utilize those fibrous carbohydrates and they'll actually burn more calories while you consume those fibrous carbohydrates because your body has to go into a little bit more of a thermogenic effect just to consume and digest those carbs. So fibrous carbohydrates, have as many as you like. Complex carbohydrates, you still need to limit how much you have because too much of a good thing is a bad thing, right? So I say that to anyone though, like even if you're trying to gain muscle, you don't want to be consuming 1,000 grams of complex carbohydrates a day unless you have a crazy fast metabolism because you are going to put on body fat. Okay. It's that analogy I use when you're running a glass under a running faucet. If you leave that glass under the running faucet, it's going to happen. Well, the glass is going to overflow with water, correct? So we want to ensure that we don't have too much carbs, too much fats, too much protein. So we got to scale back. Okay. But don't kid yourself thinking that all carbs are the enemy because that's simply not true. Complex carbs, I would try to consume at least in three, possibly four of your meals a day. Okay. Depending on what your goals are. Simple carbohydrates, I would avoid and save for a cheat meal. So if you're going out to a restaurant or something, you want to have a couple slices of pizza, or you want to have a hamburger and you want to have some bread, have it. Okay. But no, carbs are not the enemy. There's no food that's really the enemy when you think about it. It's what you do with that food. Okay. So if you're going to consume too much of that food, well, yeah, it's going to make you fat. So everything in moderation. I know people have heard that before, but it's so true. But don't start demonizing certain macronutrients and saying, well, all carbs are bad or fats make people fat. No, simply not true. Are all proteins good? Not true either, right? There's a lot of foods that have protein that I would recommend people not consume on a regular basis. Ribeye comes to mind, right? So we have to talk about fatty protein versus lean protein. So don't just say that, all proteins are the same, all carbs are the same, all fats are the same, because that's simply not true. So to answer that question, no, carbs are not the enemy, okay? Complex carbs are going to be your friend, and simple carbs are, I know I said they're your enemy, but I would say more like avoid them and have them for a cheat meal. Okay. Nick, do detox diets actually work? They can. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, if you're someone who's following a really bad diet, right, and you're having a lot of processed food, and you're having like refined carbohydrates, and you're having refined sugars, and you're constantly relying on caffeine and stimulants, your body might work really well on a detox diet. For most people, though, I find that a detox diet is not necessary. Most people that come to work with me on the nutritional plans, I find that when I look at their diets, there's a few red flags. Some people are sugar addicts. Some people don't practice proper portion control. Some people eat very sporadically. So you have to figure out, okay, what's this person's red flag? Why is the plan they're following right now not working? Okay. When you combine that with a sedentary lifestyle, that usually leads to excess weight gain. Okay. With whatever they're doing. Okay. So it's not necessarily that I have to put them on a detox diet. Oh, we got to clear you out. No, just usually probably have to clean up their diet. So we start feeding them whole food sources, whole nutritional food sources, and we start replacing the bad foods with the good foods, right? So they're getting lots of nutrients, and we're looking at not just the macronutrients, but we're looking more importantly at the micronutrients. So I don't feel that detox diets are necessary for most people. However, if you are someone who, let's say, you do have a sugar addiction and me putting you on a bunch of fruit to get rid of your processed sugar addiction is not going to work. Okay. So for someone like this, they might fall best by going on a detox diet plan. It really depends, in my experience, on the individual. Okay. What I typically will do though, when I work with somebody, whether their goal is to lose body fat or build muscle, I ask them for a 3 day plan, food log of what they do. And just to see how what their eating patterns look like, what their eating habits look like, how often they eat or don't eat. Okay. Do they typically stick with the same meals or do they have variety every single meal of the day? And then when I have that information, that's when I start to troubleshoot and that's when I start to make revisions and tweaks to the program. Okay. But if I am working with that person who is a sugar addict, for example, as I said, I wouldn't just put them on a whole bunch of fruit and say, okay, we're going to take out the processed sugar and put you on natural sugar because that won't work. These people are, this person is addicted to sugar, processed sugar. So you have to wean them off it slowly. And there's ways to do that. And so what I typically do with people like that is I'll start tapering the processed sugar down. I'll still give them processed sugar for the first 2, 3 weeks, but I'll slowly start to take it out. Okay. And I'll slowly start to add in more natural sugar. So in that scenario, that works really well for that one person. If I'm working with someone who eats sporadically and they eat like 2 meals one day, one meal the next day, and maybe 5 meals the next day, and then they binge and then they fast and all this stuff. So it's okay, our goal right now is just to practice proper portion control and meal frequency. Okay. I don't even care what your diet looks like right now. That's our goal right now. Because when you start off with those very small goals and say, okay, this week we're just going to practice portion control. Next week, now we're going to try to have at least 2 of the 5 meals are clean foods. Okay. When you start doing that, those habits become much easier to follow long term. If you try to switch everything at once, in my experience, it doesn't work for most people. So this is why I don't recommend people do that. So I'm not saying don't do detox diets. I'm not against detox diets. I just feel that most people don't need detox diets. However, if you are someone who's tried to switch up your diet plan and you maybe worked with a dietitian, nutritionist, or a coach who's tried to help you and you're like, I just can't do it, it won't work, a detox plan might work best for you. But in all my years of working with clients, I've never had to put anyone on a detox program. I just find that you just have to understand the individual's eating habits and then make revisions based on that. Okay. And that's again where it comes to working with an experienced coach that can help guide you so you yourself are not trying to troubleshoot and doing trial and error and getting frustrated as to why you're not getting the results. Okay. So working with someone who's experienced and has done this before with hundreds of people can make a huge difference from taking you from point A to point B. All right. Okay. Nick, is eating 6 meals a day better than three? No, not necessarily. I like to give people 5 to 6 meals a day. Some people I give 8 to 10 meals a day. I mean, myself, when I used to compete, I would do 12 meals a day, but everyone is different. I find for most people, they tend to respond better on small, more frequent meals, though. Although it might not be practical for a lot of people, and not as convenient, it seems to be more efficient and a more effective way to diet. And I don't just mean diet for fat loss and muscle gain. I mean for overall health and well-being. Because what happens when you're having smaller, more frequent meals throughout the day, your blood sugar levels are going to stabilize. Your insulin levels are going to stabilize. So you're not constantly fluctuating. Okay. When you have three meals a day, let's say you have breakfast at 7 a.m. and then you have lunch at like 12 p.m. and then you have dinner at 5 or 6 p.m. What's happening, that will work for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of people did that back in like the 50s, 60s, 70s, and it works. The problem, though, is that a lot of people in between those meals tend to have fluctuating blood sugar and insulin levels, depending on what the meal was. Was the meal very big? A lot of people have big lunches and then they feel really tired after in the afternoon. And then they need a cup of coffee or a shot of espresso. And to me, I'm like, that's poor dieting. Okay, so a good diet is a diet where you feel good all day long. You don't need stimulants. Like I'm doing this Q&A right now. It's 4:30 in the morning. I haven't had a cup of coffee. I feel great. I don't need a cup of coffee. I don't need a shot of espresso. Okay. I had my bowl of oatmeal. I feel great. So it's making sure that you're feeding your body the proper nutrients so that you're not relying on outside sources like stimulants or sugars. Okay. So that's why I like to use more smaller, frequent meals because what happens then is that you're constantly feeding your body every 2 or 3 hours. So you're replenishing those glycogen storages with carbohydrates, you're feeding your brain with healthy fats, and you're also fueling your muscles with protein for protein synthesis. Okay, that helps build muscle. So that's why I like to implement a strategy where I do put 5 or 6 meals on people's plans. And when I say meals, they're very small meals. They're not big meals. Like I've showed this on my Instagram. My own meals. I'm a pretty big guy. I'm 210 pounds. My meals are actually really small. They take me less than 5 minutes to eat. Okay. But I don't need to sit down for one big, large meal because I know I'm going to feel very lethargic afterwards. Whereas if I have a smaller meal, I'm not full, and that's good. I always want to feel a little bit hungry. Okay. My breakfast right now is 1/3 of a cup of oats. For a guy my size, that's not very much. But I'm going to have another meal in the next 2 or 3 hours, and then another meal on top of that, another 2 or 3 hours. So I'm constantly fueling my body with just small meals. But it's not necessary because there are people I work with. I don't have anyone on 3 meals a day, but there are some people I work with who I'm doing 4 or 5 meal plans for sure. So there's some people I'll do 3 meals and a shake. Okay. And for those people, they don't like to eat. So I'm like, all right, well, we'll make sure that you are eating properly and we might have to increase your portion sizes a little bit, but I want to ensure that you're feeling good throughout the day. So it really comes down to the individual again, because some people do respond really well to 3 meals a day. But in my experience, most people work better on a 5 to 6 meal plan. And that's what I try to implement in most clients' nutritional plans I work with. As I said, there are a few people where I'll do 4 meals, like 3 meals and a shake. Okay, because I do call a shake a meal if you're doing it with like peanut butter and whey isolate protein powder, maybe throw in a few raspberries or blueberries. That's a meal because you're getting your complex carbohydrates, you're getting your healthy fats, you're getting your lean proteins just in liquid form. So that does work for a lot of people. Okay. So you have to find the strategy that works best for you. I don't recommend doing 3 large meals a day because I feel that for a lot of people, they are going to notice fluctuating blood sugar levels or fluctuating insulin levels. And what they will notice mostly is that their energy levels go up and down throughout the day. Your energy levels, in my opinion, should stay like this throughout the day, regardless what time it is. All right. Okay. Nick, can you drink alcohol and still make progress? Yeah, I don't see why not. But again, you want to limit the amount of alcohol you're drinking and how often you're drinking it. If you're drinking alcohol every day, that can have some real adverse side effects. Never mind on your liver and your kidneys and your internal health and your organs, but also just on your mindset. Like if you're constantly going into your workouts and you're feeling a little groggy, maybe a little bit hungover, a little bit fatigued, a little bit dehydrated, that's obviously not going to help you progress, right? And alcohol does all those things. Whereas if you go out like once a week and you have a few drinks, shouldn't really be a big deal. What I typically do is for me, I might have like one day a week where I drink, or one day every 2 weeks where I'll have a few drinks. But it's not excess. I know when to stop. Okay. And I never wake up feeling hungover because I'm constantly hydrating myself while I'm drinking. So if I'm having a gin and soda, for example, I'll have a water with me. So I'm constantly hydrating myself. So that's important because as we all know, alcohol, big time diuretic, it's going to dehydrate you. Okay. Which you don't want if you're trying to train because your muscles need to be hydrated. So it's not necessarily the calories because there are a lot of calories in alcohol, especially if you're having like cocktails and stuff like this with all the sugar from the mixers. But yes, that's not good. But it's also how you're going to feel the next day, right? And that's going to impact your training. It might even impact your diet because now you're a little tired. Maybe you don't want to meal prep, and maybe you're not getting good quality sleep. So now you're even more tired and your workout suffers. So it's the negative ramifications, I should say, that are caused from the alcohol consumption. So, if you're truly serious about getting results with your health and your physique, my recommendation is to limit alcohol to once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks. Okay. And if you are going to drink alcohol, and I know I've talked about this in the past, but I want to touch on this. My recommendation is to stick to liquors like vodka, tequila, and gin. Try to stay away from your other higher caloric alcohols. Okay, so liquors, I should say. So like wine, for example. The problem with wine is people don't just stop at one glass. They usually have like three glasses, maybe a whole bottle. And that's a lot of calories, okay? It's a lot of sugar. Your body processes that alcohol into sugar. So you have to be very careful with the type of liquor that you choose. Beer is another example of one that I would avoid because a lot of people drink beer like water. There's guys that go to a bar and they'll easily pound back 8 to 9 beers. Okay, that's a lot of calories. When you're looking at like 150 to 180 calories per beer, that's a lot of calories. Okay, so I would avoid stuff like beer and wine and stick more to the hard liquors. But again, try to stick to the clear ones like vodka is good, gin is okay, and tequila is actually really good. Okay, so I think tequila is like 65 calories for 1 ounce. Okay, so it's your better option, the lesser of two evils, let's say. Okay, but that's my opinion on alcohol. I would limit it. I wouldn't say eliminate it completely. I don't think you need to unless you obviously have a problem with alcohol. But I think once a week, I have people that do that, and honestly, it has very little impact on their results. They typically do it on a day where they're maybe not training the next day. So if they do it on a Friday night, maybe they're taking Saturday off from the gym. Or if they're training, because a lot of people tell me they feel better after a night of drinking, they go to the gym. That's fine. But again, limit it and make sure that you're hydrating yourself constantly. Okay. Nick, what's the truth about cheat meals? Not quite sure I understand that question. The truth about cheat meals? Um, well, I think cheat meals, the way I look at cheat meals is they're more effective for a mental break for people. We don't physically need a cheat meal. Like nobody needs to go and have 2 slices of pizza. Nobody needs to go have burgers and fries, right? Nobody needs to sit there and have a big bowl of pasta. Okay, people want to do that, and I feel that a cheat meal works really well for a lot of clients I work with because it gives them that mental break, the mental break from the diet. Especially if I'm getting people into shape for, let's say, a competition or a photo shoot or a wedding, and then things get a little extreme towards the end where we're really starting to drop their carbs, really starting to increase their cardio, and then having that one cheat meal a week is something that they can look forward to. Okay, so it's more of a mental break for a lot of people. So I do implement one, sometimes two cheat meals in someone's nutritional plan. Rarely do I put in more than that because, again, people come to work with me. They want to transform their physiques. They want to improve their health and well-being. And at the end of the day, I feel that when I put together a nutritional plan for people, it's not unless, like I said, unless you are getting ready for a competition or a photo shoot, it's nothing extreme. So the plan I'm giving them, like, wow, this is a lot of food. And actually, I like this food. I'm like, well, yeah, because we're trying to put together a nutritional plan that's going to be sustainable for life, not one that you're going to follow for 3 weeks, lose all this weight, and then put it all back on when you jump off again. So I like to create a diet that is sustainable and realistic to follow. So there's not really any suffering, except for the people who are training for shows, like bodybuilding shows, or maybe a wedding or a photo shoot, and they have to get like really in good shape, get those for men single digits body fat levels. For women, bring it down to maybe 12, 14% body fat. So yeah, there's going to be a little bit more suffering there. But for most people, no, we don't need to go that extreme. So I don't feel that people need to have a cheat meal every day. And if you talk to anyone that I work with on their nutritional plans, they all tell me they actually like the food I put on their plans. They feel better. Okay, so they're not really craving that crap. So that to me is putting together a well-structured plan. Okay, so whether you're working with myself or you're doing it on your own, if you don't have constant cravings for junk food, that's a great sign. Okay. If you have constant energy and you're not relying on stimulants, that's another great sign. Okay. So if you're getting stronger in the gym and you're putting on muscle, your body composition is changing, you're losing body fat, that's another good sign. So you factor in all those You put in those three factors together, I should say, and you're following a great nutritional plan, right? So I recommend people do things like this when they're putting together a plan so they're not relying on cheat meals or they're not relying on junk food or stimulants. With that being said, though, I feel that for the mental break for a lot of people, and if they want to have a normal life and they want to go out and socialize with their friends and go to restaurants and have like brunches and have like nice dinners, I feel that one or two cheat meals a week can be very beneficial. Okay. So that's the truth behind cheat meals. I will just add one more thing to this. When I put cheat meals on people's nutritional plans, I generally recommend, it's not a rule of thumb, but what I recommend is people have that cheat meal as their last meal of the day. And the reason I recommend this is you have that last meal of the day, you're not craving more junk food. So if you go and you have, I don't know, you have a burger, fries, and maybe you have a bowl of ice cream. A few hours later, you might be craving more sugar from that ice cream, more simple carbohydrates from that burger. Okay. Whereas if you have that at the end of the day, you're just going to go to bed. So the cravings will be gone by the time you wake up the next day. So that's why I recommend people try to have the cheat meal as the last meal of the day, as opposed to at the beginning of the day or in the middle of the day. Another thing too is if you're having it as your last meal of the day and you've eaten all your other meals, you're not going to overeat. That's another reason why I recommend having the cheat meal towards the end of the day as opposed to the beginning of the day, because now you've filled yourself up with all the good food. Okay. So that's another strategy that I implement on people's plans. Not again, not a rule of thumb, but I find it works really well for most people. Okay. Uh, Nick, are healthy snacks actually healthy? The term healthy gets thrown around a lot. And I'll be honest with you, when I see these so-called healthy foods and I read the nutritional labels, and it's not me trying to sound like a Karen here and go, oh, you shouldn't eat this. Look at all these chemicals and all this stuff. But I will tell you that a lot of these healthy foods are not as healthy as people think. When I see foods, for example, that claim to be low fat or no fat, those are usually the worst foods you can consume. Okay. Because low fat or no fat doesn't necessarily mean healthy. Okay. First of all, healthy fats are good for us, right? So when I see foods that say low fat or no fat, and I turn around the nutritional label, a lot of these foods are usually loaded with sugar. Because if you look at a package of, let's say, Rogers sugar, just pure white sugar, and you turn that around and you read the amount of fat that's in that sugar, it'll say 0 grams. There's 0 grams of fat in sugar. None. So if you look at a can of Coke and you read the grams of fat, again, zero. Okay, but we all know that's simply not true because what happens with sugar, it converts to fat. So once it's in your body, right? So we don't just look at the nutritional label or we don't just look at the terms that says healthy or good for us and think, oh yeah, well, I can eat this. Not true. I'm not a big fan of snacks. Honestly, I've talked about this in the past. I don't really do snacks. I do meals, small meals, but not snacks. Snacks lead to uncontrolled portion sizes, mindless eating, and weight gain. Okay, so I don't think, in my opinion, most snacks that are labeled as healthy are as healthy as you might think. And if you're not sure, here's a simple rule. I use this for everyone I work with. If you're not sure if a food is healthy or not, when you read the nutritional label, look at the sugar content. If it contains more than 5 grams of sugar per serving, it's not healthy, period. I don't care if it's natural sugar. I don't care if it's processed, not healthy. Don't eat it. Okay. Because nothing you consume per serving should be 5 grams of sugar. And the reason I label natural sugar in that is because yeah, if you want to have a banana for sure. That's going to be a little bit more than 5 grams of natural sugar. But I'm talking about the stuff that you find in boxes, right? And they add processed sugar to the natural sugar. So we don't want that, okay? So you want to avoid that. And that's the main culprit that leads to weight gain, leads to type 2 diabetes, and leads to people becoming obese is sugar. Okay. It's not carbs, it's not fats, it's not calories, it's sugar. Okay. When you're constantly fueling your body with processed sugar, not only are you going to feel like shit, but you're going to put on excess body fat, period. Okay. It's going to happen. So that's the best way to understand what you're putting in your body is by looking at the sugar intake. Okay. And that's how you're going to truly understand how to fuel your body properly and more efficiently throughout the day. All right. Last question. Nick, should I avoid gluten and dairy? Ah. Good question. If you have a gluten allergy, yeah, you should probably avoid gluten. But just before we move on to dairy, talk about gluten. Gluten's already in a lot of good foods, like oatmeal, for example. Oats have gluten. Yes, you can buy gluten-free oatmeal, but regular oatmeal, like the Quaker oats, has gluten in it. And what I find is that I think a lot of people have developed allergies to gluten because there's so much gluten in our foods now, but so much. They've added gluten to the food. And if you just go back to the basics, and I'm not saying because there are some people who truly have gluten allergies, but it's just like celiacs. Only 3% of the population are true celiacs, right? But then you have a lot of people that think that they're celiac, but they're not. But they're consuming all these foods that are full of gluten, okay? And so when you're doing this, of course you're going to develop an allergy to it, right? Because it's too much. So you go back to basic foods. Like I said, rice, oats, yams, sweet potatoes. Now, these are all natural foods. You shouldn't really have a problem with them unless you yourself do have a gluten allergy. But if you truly don't, you'll be okay. But the problem is when you start having all these refined carbohydrates with processed sugars added to them. You're eating meals that are like frozen meals, for example. You buy them from the grocery store, they're frozen. And a lot of these foods do contain a lot of gluten. Okay. And so if you're consuming that much, yeah, you're going to have problems. Okay. Digestive problems for sure. So I don't feel that. I think that most people are not actually allergic to gluten. I think it's just that most people consume too much gluten. Because gluten is actually not bad for us. That's another thing too. A lot of people demonize gluten. Gluten is actually not a bad thing. But what's happened now over the years is that the nutritional companies out there, a lot of these food companies have made people believe that gluten's terrible. So they start labeling gluten free. And a lot of people, oh, that must be good for me because it's gluten free. I'm like, why is it good for you? Because it's gluten free. If you don't have a gluten allergy, you can consume it. But again, you should be looking at the food itself. Okay. That's why I say stick to natural food sources with the least amount of ingredients, because that's going to give you the more bang for your buck, per se. Okay. As far as dairy is concerned, I'm not a fan of dairy. Okay. I feel that most people, as they become older, become more lactose intolerant. With that being said, though, I do put dairy on some people's nutritional plans because some people really do like dairy, but I just tell them, okay, we'll limit it. And we'll still look for good sources of dairy. So cottage cheese, for example, like 2% cottage cheese, or I'll use Greek yogurt, skim milk. So those are sources of dairy that I'll use on people's nutritional plans. But I'm not going to tell someone to go have homogenized milk, right? Or I'm not going to have them go have cream. Okay. So I find that dairy is a food that we don't necessarily need to have on our nutritional plans. I feel like the only people that really need to consume dairy are babies. When they're developing their muscles, they're developing their tendons, their ligaments, babies need that. But I don't feel that like after the age of 5, I don't feel any of us need dairy. Okay. But I know people like dairy. Okay. So even if you look at the Canada Health Food Guideline, which is still very outdated, but I remember when I was a kid coming up, they were recommending like, I think it was 5 to 6 servings of dairy per day. And that's ridiculous. Now they lowered that. I don't even know what it's at right now. I think it's at like 2 to 3. But even then, that's too high. You don't need that much dairy. Okay, so it's not a necessary food that's necessary. If you do like it, my recommendation is just to stick to the leaner sources of dairy. So like I said, the skim milk, Greek yogurt, cottage cheese, and try to really limit the other sources of dairy like cream or homogenized milk. You have to really watch yogurt. I mean, some yogurts are okay, but a lot of those yogurts, man, even when people say, well, they're probiotics. I'm like, listen, you can get all your probiotics from Greek yogurt. You don't need to have all that other crap yogurt that's out there because all that other crap yogurt is full of sugar. So you really have to watch what you're consuming as far as your dairy intake. But again, if you're not lactose intolerant, you can have dairy. But in my experience working with the general population, most people, you have to remember, most people I work with are between the ages of 25 to let's say 75. Okay. So most people start as they get older, they start to notice when they have dairy, they have upset stomachs, they get diarrhea, they get gas, they get bloated. And I'm like, yeah, it's the dairy. You're lactose intolerant. Oh, but I always consume dairy. I'm like, yeah, but you're getting older and your body just can't digest it the same. It's very common. Okay, so I don't recommend it. I mean, if you want to have it, you can. And as I said, there are people I put dairy on their plans, usually for women, because I find that women tend to like dairy more than men. Most men I work with, they don't really care about dairy. Like I said, I would avoid foods like cheese. I would. I feel that cheese offers very little nutritional value whatsoever. You want to have it on a cheat meal. But if you're looking to build muscle and lose body fat, Cheese itself, unless it's cottage cheese, is a food that I wouldn't use. Okay, so again, I'm not trying to demonize dairy. I'm definitely not trying to demonize gluten because I have gluten in my diet, and I have no problem consuming gluten whatsoever. But again, I'm consuming natural food sources. Okay, so I'm not having cookies in a box. Of course, they're full of gluten, but they're added gluten to it. So of course you're gonna feel like crap. That combined with the copious amounts of sugar that they're adding in there and the simple carbohydrates, you're gonna feel like crap. But if you're having gluten in a cup of oats and you don't have a gluten allergy, you should feel fine. You should. So it's again making sure that you're understanding not just the macronutrients, but the micronutrients of the foods that you're consuming. Anyway, that's it for this week's No Filter Q&A. This episode will be going up on Monday, October the 6th. As a reminder, if you have any questions related to your nutritional plan, workout program, supplements you are currently taking, not taking, or considering taking, please feel free to email me those questions at nick@foreverfitperformance.com, or you can DM me your questions on my Instagram at fitcosgrove_. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for supporting my YouTube channel, my online coaching business, as well as my in-house coaching business here in Vancouver, British Columbia. I truly do appreciate all the support and all the feedback that I receive from each and every single one of you. Thank you all again, and I will see you all next week. Bye for now.